What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Let Go, Let God podcast. I'm your host, Erika Ray, and we are back with week 4 top leaders. And I have to apologize because I don't know if anybody noticed, but I did not post last week. Well, technically this week on Wednesday because I was not feeling good. I tried to record a podcast and then afterwards I was like, no, I am not. I didn't even watch it because I just felt as I was recording it that it was not from, I didn't feel like it was from the Lord. I felt like it was from my flesh trying to just get it done. And I felt kind of discouraged afterwards and was like, man, I needed to get this done. I wanted to put it out and I felt bummed out about it. So I didn't get it out. So I'm going to get out 2 this week, hopefully. So we'll be talking about Nehemiah and then Joseph for the next week. I'm not sure when I'm going to post the next week's episode. I'm not sure when I'm going to post this episode, to be honest. I'm going to try to do it this week and then be back on schedule next week for week 5 so that we can continue to go up until Christmas time because that is my goal. I have 10 leaders. I want to get through them. So anyways, I'm sorry for not posting, but we are back now. And I want to get into the story of Nehemiah. And I'm trying to think of, before I do that, any updates. I wasn't feeling very well last week, so it was just kind of a harder week. And I don't really think anything crazy happened. We have some exciting stuff happening this weekend, but I can't share it yet, so I'll have to share that on next week's episode. But we are approaching Thanksgiving in a couple weeks, so I'm excited for that. We're going to New Mexico, which is where Caden's family lives, and so we're going to celebrate Thanksgiving over there. And then I have my bridal shower coming up, which is going to be really fun. And then we have December, and then I have my bachelorette, and then our wedding, and then it's New Year's, and then we're going to go on our other second little mini honeymoon. So many things that I get to experience and share with you guys. So I'm excited about that. It's going to be a really fun couple of months. So I'm really looking forward to all of that. So anyways, we will get into it. Today we're going to talk about Nehemiah. He was known for leading the rebuilding of Jerusalem's wall. His key traits were that he was very visionary, prayerful, resilient, and organized. So we'll be focusing on Nehemiah 1 through 6. Those are the main chapters of his story. And I was reading over Joseph today because that's the next episode I'm going to do. And there's a lot of chapters for Joseph's story. It's just interesting because some of these are shorter than others, but it's cool to see that even in 6 chapters of the Bible, how impactful this person was and what they did. And it's also crazy how within this whole time that Nehemiah was gone, I believe it was about 12 years. It didn't take that long to rebuild the wall, which we'll get into it, but he was gone on mission for 12 years. And I guess not all of those 12 years were packed in these 6 chapters, but it's just crazy how much information you can put in such short paragraphs in the Bible. Right now, me and my Bible study, we're reading through 1 Corinthians, and we do about 3 chapters a week. And honestly, there's so much stuff in each chapter that we really could have taken 1 week per chapter to go over everything, but we're doing it for 10 weeks, so we had to condense it. But I didn't realize how much meat is in each chapter, which is so cool. And it really makes you think, man, I could truly be studying this as we should be studying this for the rest of our lives and always be learning something new. I'm always constantly learning new things as I study the Bible every year. And I'm always shocked by what God reveals. I'm like, I've read this so many times, but how come that was never revealed to me? It's crazy, but it's cool. I think John Mark Comer, he has a quote that says, "The Bible is so amazing that it's simple enough for a child to understand and complex enough for a human to continue to study it the rest of their lives." Anyways, So we'll be in Nehemiah 1 through 6. So we'll kind of just get right into the story. So Hanani, who is Nehemiah's brother, told Nehemiah that the wall of Jerusalem had been torn down and the gates were destroyed by fire. When Nehemiah heard this, he was distraught. He instantly went and wept and mourned and fasted. He was so upset by this news. I think just first and foremost, this shows how important it is whenever we hear disturbing or news that gets us all in weird sorts, the first thing that we should do is go to God and pray. And it's okay to mourn and it's okay to fast. I think, we have to get back up and get moving just as Nehemiah did. But I think it's really important to take that time to pause and pray and go to God, because we're not meant to suppress our emotions and our feelings. We have to bring them to the Lord so that He can help us work through them. So Nehemiah was very upset. The king saw that he was deeply troubled, and he asked him what was going on. Nehemiah told him about how the city where his ancestors were buried was basically in ruins. I know there's been so many things happening around the world. We had all the fires in LA, and we've just had so many different natural disasters. And it's really, really sad. And I think when that's your hometown or people that live there, it really affects you differently. And so I think this is probably what he was experiencing when he heard about this. This is where all of his ancestors were at, and now it's just in ruins. You look at it and it's not the same as it once was. So Nehemiah told the king about this, and then the king asked him, how can I help you? How can I help you in this situation? And Nehemiah told him he wanted to be sent to Judah to help rebuild the city. The king told him, sure, you can go do that. I will also even provide safety for you along the way. As he's traveling, there's so many people out on the road, so you never know what can happen on a journey. And so the king offered to provide safety as he was going to go do that. So he made it to Judah. He went out into the night to inspect the walls of Jerusalem. He didn't want anybody really to know exactly what he was doing. He didn't really tell anybody his plan yet. After inspecting, then he decided to go and tell the Jewish leaders, hey, this is my plan. God put it on my heart. But he wanted to go and be observant and make sure, kind of see what he was working with before he brought more people into it, which I think is very smart too. First he prayed, then he went and kind of took initiative and assessed the situation, and then he brought other people into it. I think that's so good, because I think a lot of the times we hear information and then we just act. We don't even think or pray, we just act. And so this shows a good example of him stopping, thinking, praying, assessing, and then starting to act. So the Jewish leaders were like, yeah, let's get it going. Let's rebuild. So they got started, and then there were 3 men. I may mispronounce their names, but there was 3 men, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. And they said that this would be rebellious against the king and believed that the damage was too extensive and that the wall could not be rebuilt. So there he was again, facing opposition. Chapter 3 talks all about who is in charge of building what. There's not really much there that we can get into, but that's all of chapter 3. Like, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. So they continue to build. Sanballat was getting very angry at this rebuilding, and he just started mocking the Jews. Tobiah joined him and started mocking the Jews too, and he said, that stone wall would collapse even if a fox walked along the top of it. So Nehemiah prayed every time he faced adversity, and he would say, may their scoffing fall back on their own heads. I think, again, this is such a good example for us, because sometimes if we're being made fun of or being questioned, we can act out. I think our initial human nature is to just act out and be like, what do you mean? No, I'm not, or scoffing back at them. But he prayed and he's like, okay, God, please help me. May they realize what they're doing is wrong. And I think that's just such a good thing to remember too, because life is going to test us when we're driving, if we have kids, when we're at work, with our friends, with our husbands and wives. We're going to constantly be tested. And if we always just act without thinking, then we are not doing anybody a good service. So we want to think before we act. So Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem. So what did Nehemiah do? He prayed. Once again, him and the leaders prayed. The people of Judah started to get tired as they were rebuilding this wall, and they began to complain to Nehemiah and say, what are we doing? We're getting tired. This is a lot of work. But Nehemiah reminded the workers of their calling, their goal, and God's protection. So I think a lot of times when we can get in busy, tiring seasons, it's hard to remember God's calling on our lives. Right now, well, actually, I don't know if I should share this. I was going to share something about my husband, but I think I'll have him come on here and share it himself. I think that I've just seen in my life and other people's lives, we go through these different seasons and they're tiring and they're long, and we're like, what is even the point? Did I make the right decision? Why am I doing this? Why did I get myself in this situation? I'm just going to get out. I think in those times when we're really feeling tired or sick or down, that's when the enemy's like, yes, I have them down. I'm just going to kick them while they're down. But we have to remember, no, that's when I need to rely on the Lord's strength, because his strength is greater than our strength. There's so many times last week when I wasn't feeling well where I was at work and I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm so tired. I do not feel good. I am getting frustrated that I don't feel good. I can't even complete this day with my own human strength. I need your strength to do this, because your strength is greater than mine. My human strength is not enough to make it through this day right now. And I think that, there's the verse that says, in our weaknesses, God is strong. And I think that it's such a cool way for God to show his strength in our weaknesses. It's the coolest way. I would love to have God's strength through me versus my own strength. My own strength is like this compared to God's strength in my life. So, anyways, Nehemiah reminded them of their calling, their goal, and God's protection. And they knew that the enemies were going to come and fight them. So half the men decided to work on the wall while the other half stood guard. And they had, their shields, spears, bows, their coats of mail, which we talked about what that was in last week's episode with David. And some of the Jewish men and women were saying that they needed more food for their large families. They were saying that they were running out of food and they needed more. And they started getting in their heads again, and they said, we need to sell our children and sell them into slavery so that we can get enough money to live. And Nehemiah was like, what? So then he says, and this is a quote, he says, we are doing all we can to redeem our Jewish relatives who have had to sell themselves to pagan foreigners, but you are selling them back into slavery again. What are you doing? We are trying to get out of this hole, and you are selling them back into this hole and this rut that we're trying to get out of. They really had nothing to say after that. They were like, okay, fair point. But it was so hard for them to focus on anything because they were like, we need food and all of these things to live. So they were willing to sell their children into slavery, which this is not an uncommon thing in the Bible. We see people eating their children whenever they run out of food. There's just some not so great things that happen, but it's like our human flesh takes over. And when we're not relying on the strength of the Lord, then we get all delirious and we're like doing all these crazy things. So after that, Sanballat and Tobiah were desperate in efforts to stop the rebuilding of this wall. It wasn't working. And so they decided to take a different plan of action. They were like, okay, what we're doing right now is not working. So then they decided to attack Nehemiah's character. And so they went and told him, there's a rumor among the surrounding nations that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that is why you are building the wall and you plan to be their king. So all of their physical acts weren't working. So they're like, we're going to attack his character. They tell him this. And then Nehemiah was like, that's not true. He knew there was no truth about this. And so they continued to build. And then once they started, the wall was finished 52 days after they had started working on it. So a little less than 2 months, which is pretty cool. And then after that accomplishment, the enemies realized the work had been done with the help of the Lord. And then Nehemiah and the people gave glory to the Lord. And just like the story of David and Goliath, David hitting Goliath with a stone, it's such a cool thing that, you wouldn't expect to happen. And then all the people saw, oh, this is the work of the Lord. Just like, oh my gosh, these people went through all this adversity and they finished building this wall in 52 days. This had to have been the work of the Lord. And so once again, it's God working through these crazy situations to show his glory. So that's kind of the story. It's not a very long one, but I think that it is such an important one, and it's such a good story of leadership as well. It just talks about so many amazing leadership qualities that we should have. So now, kind of like we did last week, I'm going to break it down into 7 different points of what we can learn and take away from this story. So, I just looked at my notes that I had made regarding this episode, and I told myself when I was trying to record last week, I was saying, I'm going to write down how I'm feeling right now so that I can look back and see. It's kind of what I told you guys. I put, I am in a mood and I'm tired. I thought I could push through, but I feel like what I'm saying right now doesn't make sense. And then I wrote down, I don't know if I need to rewrite this episode or just re-record at a different time. Also, Caden was in the other room at the time, and I don't really like when he's here when I record. He doesn't even listen to me, and we've had podcasts together, but it's just, I get nervous. I don't know. I like when I'm just by myself and I get to record. And that's just funny. Okay, sorry, that was a little side note of my true, real human feelings of struggling to record this podcast. So I don't feel like it was the right time for me to record. Truthfully, I'm like, I don't think the Lord wanted me to say what I was saying. I don't even want to re-watch that video because I don't know. I really felt delirious. Anyways, we're going to go through 7 key points from this story. So number 1, we feel a burden for what's broken. Just like Nehemiah wept whenever he heard Jerusalem's walls were in ruins, we also feel compassion or conviction when we see something broken. So, like I said, when we hear about these natural disasters or these Christians being persecuted or these people getting killed, we feel this compassion and conviction and we think, oh my gosh, what can we do? How can we help the situation? And I think we see those, and also we see broken things within our families, communities, or even within ourselves. And, we have that compassion and we think, what can we do? And so I think it's a good example to, number 2, pray before we act whenever we are faced with those situations. Nehemiah didn't rush into the act. He stopped and prayed, and he didn't just stop and pray before he went on mission. He stopped and prayed every single time he faced adversity, which I think is so important because we a lot of times go and we prepare so much for something, and then once we're in it, I think we forget to continue to constantly pray and talk to God. I know sometimes I've been guilty of that. You prepare and pray so much for something, and then you get it, and then you're in the midst of something, and then now all of a sudden you think you can do it with your own power. Yeah. So I think praying consistently is such a good thing, and asking for God to get us through and to give us wisdom. Number 3, we step out in faith despite fear. So this was also something that David did. I'm sure he was slightly fearful to go and face the big giant. Nehemiah did this when he was having to go and speak to the king, and then, of course, having to face opposition when he got to Judah. So I think sometimes we can face fear whenever we're stepping into new seasons or responsibilities. We have to act courageously, trusting God to open doors. I'm trying to think when I feel as though I face fear. I think some tangible things that can be kind of fearful are new situations. So anytime I started a new job, I was filled with a little bit of fear. I'm the new person. I don't know if people are going to like me or how they're going to act, all these different things. Also, if we enter into the stage of marriage, there can be some fear of what is this going to look like when we enter into the stage of having children. There's definitely got to be some fear. I don't have children, but I can only imagine. And, maybe we move out of state or we go to a different location. I don't know. And there's just so much fear. I think the time that I feel the most, I don't even want to say fearful, but just I get a little bit, like a little bit nervous is whenever I do enter a new situation because you don't know what to expect. There's so much comfort in knowing, you're going to something that you do all the time. But whenever I'm faced with new situations, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, and I think that that's why it's so helpful for people to be so welcoming and loving, because the second you have somebody being welcoming and loving to you at a new job or at a new church or whatever it is, then those walls start to come down and you're like, okay, this isn't that bad. This is actually really cool and really fun to meet new people and start these new experiences. Okay, number 4, we rebuild what's been torn down. Nehemiah rebuilt this physical wall, and sometimes we go and we help rebuild things, physical things that have been built down, houses, buildings, churches, all of those different things. But a lot of the times what we have to rebuild is more emotional, spiritual, or relational walls that have been torn down. So whenever we get in an argument with family or friends, there maybe is some things that are said that we shouldn't have said, and we have to rebuild that wall of trust. Maybe you get out of a relationship and you are very distraught. There's just so many things that happen, and you have to rebuild trust and in that area because you really just went through it in this relationship. You trusted this person, and now you have to restart everything all over again. So you have to rebuild that. There's so many different areas that we have to rebuild, and I think they're not as tangible as a physical wall, but they're more internal things. Number 5, we face opposition. Nehemiah was constantly being distracted by his enemies. We face criticism, doubt, and spiritual warfare all the time, every day. We have to stay focused on God. We were just talking about this in our small group. There's so much chatter going on in the world. Everybody does things a certain way. Everybody's going to have their own opinions. And so it's honestly really hard to know what should I do and what should I not do. We're talking about the gray areas of life, and there are truthfully some things that are not black and white, and that's where we have to pray. I mean, we have to pray in all situations, but I think that when we're faced with criticism or doubt, some people are just being that way. Other people are trying to be helpful, but their delivery is not very well with it. And so I think in those situations, of course, pray and ask God, hey, this person said this thing about me. Is that actually true, or should I just let this thing go? Because sometimes people say things to me and I know that I have to let them go. But then other times people say things to me and I'm like, they're kind of right. So I need to think about that and pray about that. So we face opposition, but we have to stay focused on God, just like Nehemiah did. Number 6, we need community. Nehemiah did not rebuild this wall all by himself. He had a bunch of people helping him. There's no way. I mean, with God's help, he could do anything, but he needed help to rebuild this wall. We are called to work together, be in community with other people. We never know what life's going to throw at us, and it's way easier to do life with people than it is when you're not doing life with people. I've truly been blessed throughout my life to always have people in my corner, but there's definitely been seasons where it has felt a little bit lonelier, and even in those seasons I'm like, oh, this is tough. And so I think that, building community is so important. And just a little plug, I think that everyone's different. I know that there's extroverts and introverts. I'm a little bit more extroverted, but I actually sometimes, I'm not introverted, but I do get nervous in situations with new people. And I actually have a lot more confidence whenever I'm the one hosting or inviting people over. I don't know what it is, but for example, if I have a small group and I'm inviting new people over at my house, then I'm like, yeah, come over. Like, I'm not nervous at all, which I guess I am in my own territory, which makes sense. But I feel like me doing that helped me get out of my shell. So then when I would go to. All right, I got distracted because I saw. I saw Kaden walking by through the window, and then I told you guys at the beginning of this podcast how I get nervous when he's here. So
I don't know
no,
why.
no, you can't talk. You don't have the mic.
Fine.
They can't hear you anyways.
I bet they can.
So I was talking about the leader, Nehemiah. Oh, wait. Anyways, so I kept telling Kaden to just go take a 5-minute walk so I could finish, but then he wouldn't. So then I just told him to come sit here because.
Yeah, that's the story.
Because then I wouldn't be as nervous. So, anyways, I'm going to fill him in as we wrap up. So, we're talking about the leader Nehemiah, who helped rebuild Jerusalem's walls. And I'm going through takeaways from the story because I already went over the story. And I was on number 6, which is we need community because Nehemiah couldn't rebuild the wall all by himself. So, he needed an army to help him. So, I was talking about how it's very important that we need community. And I also was talking about how I feel like it's actually easier for me to have community when I am hosting and more in control of the situation versus whenever somebody else is having something, then I get kind of nervous when I go. But then it gets me out of my shell and it's good. So the whole point of that is I think you have to find what works for you in knowing, oh, hey, like, I really like going to these events or like bringing a friend. Do you have any thoughts about good ways to build community? I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Not even a pre-thought or anything hits me with the question. Um, I've not been good at it lately, but
Well, you've been really busy.
yeah, that doesn't help. I mean, you have to put yourself out there, which is I feel like the hardest part.
How? Give an
You have to go and
example.
you have to go and talk to people. You can't think, oh, I see those people. I could maybe like go and introduce myself to them. No, I won't. I mean, next time. I've been guilty of that, and then you never build anything. Versus that time you push yourself to go and do it, you go and talk to people. I mean, you just have to do that initially. Go to things, go to events. Now that we're married, staying home is like kind of really nice sometimes, and so you can't fall into that either. For those married folk out there. But building community is kind of hard, especially in a bigger city. I don't know. Can't really say that I've figured that out fully yet. Get involved in your church. Go approach those people that you have a nudging to go and approach.
Like you approached me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, yeah.
Look at us now.
Look at what happens. You might marry that person you want to approach, I guess.
Sometimes if I'm in the gym or in a situation where it's like me and one other person and I start to feel awkward, then I analyze the other person really quickly and then I'm like, ooh, how can I compliment this girl so then it's not weird in the gym? And then I'll be like, I really like your shirt or something, or like your hair's cute. And then I feel like it's not awkward in the gym anymore. Do you guys
That's
ever
a
do
fair
that?
point. Guys, no, not that way. I mean, I see a guy, I'm like, hey, your hair looks cute today. Like, nice biceps, dude. Like, just, I don't know how you really win
Okay,
in that
but
scenario.
do they have their own guy way of doing something?
You could compliment a shirt. Maybe it's like a band or I don't know, something more bro like than your hair is cute. Not gonna say that. I won't.
Okay, anyways, so yeah, maybe one day we could do an episode on building community, but that wraps up number 6. And then number 7, the last point to take away is that we point everything back to God. So I was telling them in the story, which I'm sure you've read it, but it's not a very common story. So it's something that I had to review. But at the end of building the wall, they did it in 52 days. And all the people knew there's no way they could have done this unless God was helping them. So even at the end, Nehemiah and all the Jewish leaders gave glory to God for rebuilding the wall. So I think whenever we accomplish something really big, first thing to do is to give the glory to God and thank Him and remember that He's the one who got us through. And it wasn't by our own doing. So pointing the glory back to God. Do you have any comments on that?
That's exactly what you need to do. This is your podcast. I'm just a guest.
Yeah, but now that you got here, even though we're ending, I'm like, ooh, this is kind of fun. What else can we talk about?
I would rather prepare my answers. I don't know. I don't like what's gonna come out of me initially. That would just not be as eloquent with my speech.
I like when it's just raw
On
and
the
real,
fly.
you know?
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, anyways, that's all I have for today. That's all we have for today. So, yeah, I guess we're going to continue on with our day. And I will record next week and be talking about the leader Joseph. So I'm really excited. He has a really big story and he's one of my favorites. So, anyways, stay tuned, subscribe, like all the things, and we'll see you next time.
Or else.
Stop.